Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, depending on where you are on this fast forward planet, which is wrapped in so many layers of turbulent change and complexity. I've stopped listing them here on Sustain What. This is a show I've been doing for 6 years, trying to get some clarity amid the complexity we all deal with in our daily lives. And if your issue is geopolitical peace or climate change or having an information environment that's navigable and not full of pollution, as the current one is. We try to dissect those issues going forward, and that's why I'm really happy to have today on the show as a guest an old fellow journeyman on the journalism and climate arena, Chris Mooney, who started in this field early on as a young, talented, brilliant uh, blogger, and he wrote a couple of books that stirred things up in a big way. He ended up at the Washington Post, where he was part of a big team that won I think it's the first Pulitzer Prize for climate stuff. Is that right? I don't know of any other Pulitzer
I
that came
I
before.
have to check that. Thank you, Andy. Thank you
I
for the
think I'm pretty
note.
sure it is.
Yeah, I think I don't want to be wrong, but I think that
Yeah.
there was a book, and I'm forgetting the details. But anyway, make
Oh,
the
the
puns.
prize. Well, the prize. I think
Yeah, yeah,
but that was about oil and stuff. Anyway,
yeah.
and you're on Substack.
Correct.
Um, and you've been at the University of Virginia, and I think there's a move. Is it public yet? The move to where you are now, or where are you going?
Yes, yes. Going to the
So,
University of Tennessee, Knoxville.
University of Tennessee, Knoxville, to lead a program there, which is fantastic. Um, Amazing part of the country, and really good platform from which to do the work you're doing. But we'll start. We'll start with. I want to dive back into your journey, but maybe just start today by saying, why are you on Substack? What is it you're exploring here? Which, part of it is about climate science and the like. You dig into the data, but you're also exploring journalism itself, which is
Yes.
in free fall to a certain extent, and morphing in many ways. And
Well,
you have this piece out about AI, and so just tell in a very general way. Say what stimulated you to do this kind of writing now.
sure. Thanks, Andy. And it's great to be on with you. And we've known each other a long time. We have been on parallel journeys, and so it's good to reconnect in this way. The Substack is an experiment. I'm probably mostly exploring myself. I don't know about the topics, but I'm someone who spent the last roughly decade, minus the last 2 years, but roughly a decade uh, at a major newspaper, and that was the Post, and up through 2024, and then I've been since then out for about 2 years. So the Substack, which started a little over 1 year ago, was me trying to figure out what my voice is now,
Right.
because it's changed so much, and what I could contribute in a new role that is uh, significantly one of an educator, as well as one of a journalist. I'm teaching students how to do this stuff. I also made a pivot in the last 5 or so, a little more years, towards data journalism, and I have a really strong focus on that. Um, so I've been exploring what I can do with this new makeup of who I am, and some things on Substack work, and some things don't. I think the latest one you've drawn a little attention to has been a conversation starter, which is nice.
Yeah. Maybe we could dig in on that just as an example. Well, although let's start with life as an x-axis.
Okay, that's certainly one of the more experimental ones for sure.
It's a big hefty post, but just you could summarize a little bit the idea here.
Well, this is me trying to apply data-driven thinking to the structure of journalistic stories, and trying to explain how, specifically narrative ones, this is really about the craft. It's not
Yeah.
about current events. And what I'm trying to make the case for is the idea that if you conceive of your writing process as a process of data collection, then you can actually use data tools, plotting, sometimes mapping, in order to figure out the structure of your work. The most common data tool and type of visualization is a timeline, so hence life is an x-axis. So events travel in time along the x-axis. But there's much more sophisticated versions that you can employ. The point is that if you see writing as a process amenable to data analysis and visualization, then you can see your own work differently, and this can lead to some good results. So for instance, just to give an example, I use my story about a team of scientists that went to Greenland. This story came out in 2014. It's one of my favorites, but it's a ways back. This was in the Post. I went to Greenland to recover missing data. And I didn't think in this way at all at the time, but I went back and I treated that story as data, just taking the different sections and giving them identifiers, but also giving them time slugs, and then plotting them in time, but also plotting the order in which you encounter them in the story, which is different than the order in which they occur in time, because there's a sort of a flashback, and how you can sort of map and chart those and understand your narrative structure. And maybe the point is, maybe you can be a better writer by doing this. Certainly when I write now, I try to do this. I don't know if that's been a...
By the way, what's interesting about this is most of us journalists we're like sharks. We just keep swimming forward and we never assess. I mean, I did at the times, when I started .earth as a blog, it felt like a natural way to fill in blanks and to deal with complexities that didn't fit in a traditional article in a newspaper. And I like to think I keep trying to learn, but at the same time, we're about the new and the different. And I'm sure you had that same feeling as once you got into the Post, of just sort of never having time to assess. Was that part of what has driven you now?
Yes, I have had more time. It's been wonderful to have some time at UVA, and I've been thinking about teaching, thinking about how to teach writing, thinking about what I'm even doing when I'm writing. And out of that has come these rather experimental things where I'm turning my own previous works into data sets in order to understand their structure. I intend to do more of this. I don't know what folks will think about it, but it's really helping me become a better writer. And sometimes when you see something like that, it'll be partly based on some of my in-class teaching when I'm creating lectures and I'm sort of trying to explain how you structure a narrative story or something like that. And then I sort of say, wait a minute, data can make this better.
Yeah, I want you to cite this. You do in your long piece here. It's a two-parter, actually. You talk about journeys, and I didn't. This dates from the 1700s. This was
that's Tristram Shandy by Lawrence Stern, and it's a very, very funny, famously
book that
strange
has a lot
novel.
Of twists and turns.
And the narrator tries to draw the storyline, or the plot line, and it looks like this. Which is the joke: is the narrator can't tell a story because he keeps interrupting himself. That's what we
call ADHD in my world.
Yeah, but I drew on this to say that, well, if we think about stories as timelines, there's the order of events and the order of narration. They're not always the same, but we both tend to visualize them as flowing in an arrow, from left to right. Who actually thought about it this way, and how far back does thinking about it this way even go? And this is as far back as I could find. This? Because I remember this from college, but I've always remembered it ever since, because it just made me laugh at the time. So I put it in.
Yeah. And so, what's a core takeaway so far in your chronologizing or mapping of your own work?
If I had done this sooner, I would have been a better writer.
There you go.
I mean, we just sit down. I don't know your process, but I mean, my process was really,
you don't want to know.
Sit down and try to start at the beginning, and then you often fail, and you go try to write another part. And iteratively doing it, the pieces start to fit together a little better, and then eventually an editor comes in and says, "No, 50% of that's gone," or whatever it is.
Right.
But I was thinking to myself, does it have to be this way? And in fact, or rather, could you figure out um, what your series of events are in time and list them, and sometimes even list them against another variable. Like I don't know, it could be a variety of different. It depends on what the story is, but maybe it's climate change and it's a story in time, and then the other variable is the temperature, or something like that. I actually
Right.
did a plot like that. So then your narrative might then be what happens, and you would might be including the temperature as you go along as part of the narration. And I'm just asking, if we do it this way, would we tell different stories? Would we tell better stories? Would we gather facts and realize they're important to the narrative that we would have forgotten to gather? Things like that. Um, so
Yeah. And I have you tried to do that not just with individual stories, but with your your journalistic journey? In other words, you started out blogging, as far as I know.
yes, we were at the American Prospect magazine. We were very, very early bloggers.
So
Tap.
you went from that, which I
Yeah,
stumbled into in 2007.
yeah.
But you
We were doing
started
that.
with a
That
very
was
blogging
2001,
is
I
like a
think.
free form-ish,
Yeah.
and then you did books right in the middle of that, which are
Yeah, what I did was my first real job in journalism was writing fellow at the American Prospect magazine, the sort of renowned liberal magazine of ideas. They had this fellowship program that a lot of journalists whose names you know went through, like Ezra Klein and
right.
Joshua Micah Marshall. And I was one of those. One of the things that we did when I was there, I think I had actually gone on from being a fellow to being staff, but we created a blog attached to the magazine, which was then an innovative thing to do. And
Right.
that actually was really popular. It was called Tapped, Tapped. And I continued there for a couple of years. I went out on my own, and then of course you create your own blog. Nowadays you would create a Substack,
Right.
but you created your own blog, and I think that was about 2003. Um, yeah, and I was then a freelance writer with a blog and started doing some. Yeah, this is this is me trying to connect the dots between starting on Substack and starting a blog 2 decades earlier.
Right. And you said, well, and then maybe tell me, let's go. I want to get back to your books in a minute, but it must have been challenging to go from that kind of free form and independent work to then going to the Washington Post. I certainly felt that with the New York Times when I started there in 1995, after I'd
I
already,
realized I had a lot more to learn. Yeah. Um,
or yeah, in terms of what did you have to feel like you had to learn, and then
oh, I mean, you
what
just go
felt
to
like
this.
a constraint.
Uh, you go to this place, and it's one thing to be on your own. Um, you know, writing, creating. Uh, and I think I did great work. But when you're part of a team at a paper of record, and you're surrounded by distinguished journalists, many of whom have. I mean, I have my great strengths, but I also have my weaknesses. Many of them are better at a variety of different things than me, like getting sources or. I mean,
Right.
everyone's got their own technique. I mean, I think it really pushes you, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah,
Um,
for sure.
and so that was initially a great learning period. And then I hit my groove there, I think, and we did some pretty influential work. So,
Well, you certainly did. So then maybe we'll backtrack to the time when you started to write your books. We should here are you did one on hurricanes too during that whole period of
yeah,
hurricanes and
yeah,
climate change.
I
But
did. Yeah,
you started out pretty provocatively.
sure. Yeah, I was a young writer,
Yeah,
coming out of the liberal political magazine environment, and I wrote some. But I cared about science,
yeah.
and I wrote about the politics of science, and that was certainly my first big area of impact. Yeah,
Well, in that first book in
yeah, and
2000,
science communication as well, I would say.
yeah, yeah. Your first book, when you think about what's been going on in the second Trump administration, feels rather prescient Back then in 2005, 6, 7, there still were moderate Republicans, what you would call a moderate Republicans, who valued science. Clearly now, when it comes down to budgets, there's still Republicans in Congress who vote for science budgets. But they've enabled demolition that's at a level and scope that's just unbelievable. What does it feel like seeing what's been unfolding after having written that book in
Well, I mean, I wrote
ago?
about this 20 years ago.
Right.
I mean, I was a young journalist, and certainly I made a big mark. I have not kept it as my beat since. I can say for sure that the rift that I was detecting between scientists and one side of the political spectrum has worsened since that time. I think that's pretty objectively true, and you can actually look at the polling data. For instance, I mean, something happens during COVID that really politicizes science in the minds of the electorate in a way that it wasn't before. You can see the trust divide widen between Democrats and Republicans, much more than it was caused by something like climate change, I think.
Oh, yeah.
I think it's because we were all living daily a scientific issue, and you had to have a view about it, whereas you don't have to have a view about everything, right? And a lot of people don't. And
right.
One thing about the climate issue is that not everyone's really that engaged with it. It's always seen as something in the future or what have you. But COVID was not. It was in the present. You had to have a view about it. And then, of course, people polarize. So things, the politics of science are more fraught today. I don't know how I don't have a big analysis of it because, like I did then, because the situation is really different. The media is radically different than it was then. I mean, if you were going to really talk about this, you would have to. You couldn't ignore that. I mean,
Twitter launched the year that book was.
Yeah, something like that. Twitter's 20 years old, maybe. Certainly, when I did the first book, tweeting about it wasn't really a thing.
No.
Blogging about it was a thing. And also, I mean, it's also much more today. It's a battle over the funding of science rather than a battle over the content of science, I think, at least in the current administration, which requires a different set of thoughts and arguments because funding is more a policy choice as opposed to whether you're representing something accurately or not, which is mostly what I was focused on.
Yeah.
So it's a different debate, but I really haven't contributed. I've been doing other things, and I have not really found time to really say what I would say about this. Although I'm saying some parts of it, but in a media analysis and communications sense. So.
Although, I mean, it's gone beyond even funding and certainly communication now, in the sense that agencies have been demolished, and our relationship with the World Health Organization has ended, and so it's really operational too. It's stunning. I think your book should be reread and by folks who think this is something new. It's something that's emerged in a way that the roots were pretty clear, even getting clarified then. That was when 2007, I think that was, well, it was Al Gore's movie, and then Senator Inhofe's reaction to Al Gore's movie.
Yeah, my book was 2005.
Yeah.
Look, I mean, the shared agreement that science makes the world better, makes us healthier, makes us wealthier, and has that value, and that yes, there'll be disagreements, but it has that value, so it's really good for a country to advance that. I mean, that's what the agreement needs to be. Certainly, that has been really challenged And exactly how you get back there is bigger than something that I can give you the answer for right now.
Yeah, I I don't think anyone can give you an easy answer on that one. I wouldn't push you to try to do it
Yeah.
because it's so profound. One thing from back that period I wanted to go over too was, uh, and now you're in more of a scholarly position, but even back then you were doing work like this. This was a policy forum, which is essentially almost like an op-ed in the journal Science with Matt Nisbet, who's a longtime social scientist focused on policy and the intersection with science. That feels relevant today too. Maybe you could just put on your memory bank, put on your memory banks, draw on your memory banks, and
Sure. Well, I mean,
a little bit too.
I've kept honestly more. I continue to talk a lot about science communication, and this is honestly I've been in my teaching. I really focus on that. One of my whole courses is about communicating science. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, you have to talk about framing to teach communication. I mean, it's one of the key fundamental concepts. And so, I mean, I haven't reread what I wrote with Matt in a pretty long time, but I have a good sense of what it's saying and roughly, or how I would express it now, is that when science is being communicated, there's always a choice about what to highlight out of a very complex topic, whatever it is, and what to put in the foreground of communication and what to put in the background or communication. And every topic has got so much information to it that choice has to be made, or else you really won't even be communicating. Right?
Right.
So what that policy forum was saying was that scientists should be conscious of the choice, and they should make the choice, because making the choice has a big effect on the audience's perception. And not every communication should therefore be technical. It doesn't have to be. If you take the example would be climate change, right? There's the technical. There's how much is it warming? When will we reach 1.5 C? What is what are the drivers? And then all of the sub debates about what have you, right? And they're all debates about evidence and how you interpret it and what are the role of models. So it's all technical, but that is not the only way to talk about the topic, because it has so many other resonances, so many other implications. So you could suddenly talk about it as an international policy matter. You could suddenly talk about it as a human health matter. You could talk about it as an economic matter, where you would have different sides. But you could do that, and you would be immediately initiating a different conversation, which people would immediately respond to in a different way, because you would be bringing up different considerations related to the topic.
Yeah.
That's basically what framing is. And I think that's what we were saying, was just recognize that this is a thing. It powerfully influences how audiences perceive your information. Don't go out there without being aware that that you can do this, and in fact, you probably inevitably will do this even without thinking about it, because you have to organize the information in some way. So realize the power of these frames, and that's really one of the key aspects of science communication. We were talking before about another, which is what is the role of narrative and story?
Yeah.
Which is also very important, different. But I teach on all these, so I try to think about all these as best I can. Try to give students the best sense of them. But also, I often find myself then feeling like I've got something to say. So there's a lot of what you read me writing these days kind of comes out of that process.
Right. What you're saying, by the way, reminds me. This is also from back in the day. I was struck. It was before 2015. This was a post I did at the time. Someone was pushing the hashtag "I am a scientist because."
Interesting. Yeah.
And when I've been talking with scientists about science communication, I really encourage them to complete that sentence as the first thing, instead of saying I use a spectrophotometer to measure X.
Right.
Why are you scientists? That's like it's something that connects the average person with your field in a way that can then lead them to say, well, what's the spectrophotometer? And I think that's one of the key things. The Another though is, and I'm sure you know this very well because it's in that same body of science. You can present the same facts to diverse array of people, and they'll come away with completely different conclusions. That's that
Absolutely.
work. Cultural cognition is what Dan Kahane called it, and um,
But if you switch the frame, you might then have a very different effect.
right. And
Right.
so, and that also requires a lot of listening. Meaning, who is in a position to listen to what I'm either writing or saying, and
Mhm.
understanding that diversity of views, or the information in the right context. Is it a congressional hearing, or is it an op-ed? Are you at a town meeting? Those are all different, completely different contexts.
Mhm.
How much in the teaching you're doing now and will be doing? How much of it's for students who are already in the communication world, or is any of it for the science kids? Young people who are getting degrees in science, who might also want to know, how do I present myself to the rest of the world?
So far, uh, I've taught I've I've taught scientists communication in university setting. So that's more, graduate students, PhD students, some undergraduates in science, um, and I've taught journalists journalism, but I've really been teaching data journalism. I'm still so it's more of a very specific kind of journalism, um, heavy on coding and graphics and such. But I'm still going to be expanding my teaching more and more. That's really kind of what I've done so far. I have not done anything quite as basic in journalism at this point, which is something I'm hoping to gain more of a track record in. So I've sort of dived in with, I guess you would say, electives.
That's great. And so again, you've just this was just announced recently. You're moving to University of Tennessee, Knoxville.
Hmm.
And it's a program endowed by the Oak Ridger news family. And
The founders of the Oak Ridger,
Oak
which is
Ridge was a science town, a science city.
is
Is
right.
yeah, good point. Right.
I'm actually moving there, and um, yeah, it's a story that's actually was really compelling to me. You have um, in today's Oak Ridge was at one time during the war a secret city, right, where they were contributing to the Manhattan Project. Um, it opened up after the war, um, and at that time, the Hill family. Hoping I'm getting this history right, but I did research this a bit. Um, were asked, I forget by whom, they were already a newspaper family, to start the community's newspaper. And so they came in and created the Oak Ridger, which still exists today. Um, but it, like newspapers across the country, have has seen a lot of challenges
Right.
in the business, and has a smaller staff than at one time it did. It still publishes. That's something that you see across the United States, especially newspapers for smaller communities, which are really still really important. Um, and so, as someone who worked in a newspaper for 10 years and is a teacher on journalism and coverage of science in particular, the state of newspapers and their importance and how to preserve the values that the journalistic values that they embody has become a pretty important thing to me. I certainly realize that it's not going to be the way it once was, where they were really our dominant um, sources of information, or one of our dominant sources of information. But still, there's a real need for communities to get information that affects them locally, and newspapers were really critical for that for a long time. If it's just the community's Facebook page, it's not really the same, although that's what it increasingly is in a lot of places. So that's a whole big discussion, and that's a major focus of mine. And you'll see that one of the things I do on the Substack is I track the state of the newspaper industry. I track
Right.
the state of newspaper employment. I mean, it's basically been downhill since the 90s. Um,
Yeah.
but the thing is that it continues, and I don't know where the bottom is. And I certainly worry that the standards and norms that are taught for journalism in that context, um, if we lose those, I think we're not in a good place. Um, so the fate of the institutions, still really remains important. Um,
Yeah, for sure. Have you thought much or about maybe some of that teaching you've done to non-journalism students relates to, if not expanding the norms of journalism, fostering a better awareness of that to readership audiences, because they need to do more of the work now to understand what's real or not real?
yeah, I think. Let me think about how to put it. I think that the norms, um, I believe in them. I mean, I think that they've got their flaws, but overall, I think that it's a pretty good way to go about getting the right information. Um, Helped most of all by the fact that you really have to reach out to someone, and get their perspective if you're writing about them, right?
Right.
And you really have to check your facts, or else you have to run a correction, and that looks bad. You really need to give a right of reply if you're really presenting some kind of information that could be seen as damaging to someone or negative about all these things, right? These are part of the norms, and I think that they're very, very valuable. I don't think they're well understood outside of the business, um, and it's not clear to me how to change that easily. I mean, yes, you can educate to some extent in the university context about how media work and why journalism is done the way it's done. But that's not necessarily a mass audience.
Yeah. This issue of having, I think the media, the thing we call the news media, can do a better job of helping audiences, not just providing them with information, but providing them with um, mental strategies or tools that can help them navigate an environment, a media environment that's increasingly torqued away from the content we call journalism or reality based stuff. Uh, I see some examples. Like there was a La Crosse Tribune in Wisconsin a few months back. This is interesting because it'll segue into AI.
Okay.
There was a reporter there who did a really good piece, I thought, when there was some viral imagery floating around of dead eagles. There were like
Hmm.
half a dozen dead bald eagles on a table, kind of a frosty looking. And this young reporter at that newspaper did a story explaining why this was not true. And he interviewed some naturalists, and he went forward. I reached out to interview him for Sustain What, because I thought it was really cool. It seemed like he was helping, give people a sense of, just because you see a picture of a bunch of dead eagles doesn't mean they actually exist. Um, and he wasn't allowed to speak to me because the newspaper is increasingly using AI in their news generation process.
Hmm.
And they felt uncomfortable with having a conversation with one of their reporters about AI generated imagery when they're using AI in other ways. And I thought, wow, that's really interesting, because I loved
Hmm.
what he was doing.
Hmm.
And your latest piece is about single studies. Is there what's going to happen with journalism when we traditionally, so many times, the beginning of the week we get those embargoed lists of science and nature papers with tasty abstracts and news releases, and we decide which study to write an article about. And you did a piece about uh, how that's
Yeah.
probably not going to be persisting as part of what we do. Maybe
Uh-huh.
just talk a little bit about AI, how you see AI generally in the
Sure.
news.
Well, I mean, AI made me write that piece. The increasing, what I mean is the increasing turn of journalists, some journalists towards AI, which I'm concerned about. Right. I'm not feeling comfortable with journalists using AI directly in writing. I think there's a lot of dangers and pitfalls there. I do feel like it's probably it is fine, and it's going to become the standard for research, various types of research, and I don't think that's that much different than doing a web search or when we would read Wikipedia pages, it was always okay, but then you have to confirm it, and
Right.
I think that will be the posture if AI gives you any information that when you're searching, which inevitably now when you're searching, you're pretty much going to have AI involved in some way, right?
Yeah.
But you have to verify it. That needs to be the norm there. But the writing process, I'm not comfortable with. I think that's got a whole another set of issues. But my piece was about, okay, some people are going to do this though, and I take that as kind of inevitable. And I was reacting to the fact that there's already instances of it happening. So I then reasoned that one of the things that those who are doing what I would not advise, which is letting AI write stories, one of the things they'll be able to do is write these stories about studies very fast because they'll be able to upload the text of the study and they'll be able to say, write a journalistic story about it.
Yeah.
And something looking somewhat like a journalistic story will come out. What it won't have, unless it's fabricated or unless they've got some other source for it, is real quotations, fresh quotations that the journalist would have collected from the traditional reporting process. I mean, that's not there. It's not in the input. I talk a little bit about where that might come from, but in general, the point is that these kinds of stories are pretty easy for an LLM to produce. And so I fear that they will be used to produce them. And I think that's another challenge to what was already a challenged genre. There were other issues already with single study stories. I mean, it's clear that sometimes they're important and sometimes they need to be done, especially in the canonical cases. You've got some new finding about a drug that treats something that a very large percentage of the population has, and that could be a big clinical trial result that's published in a study or just published by a pharmaceutical company or what have you. I mean, that kind of thing, you can clearly see that's still going to be news, and that would probably count as single study. So it's not like it would stop happening, but a lot of people have raised concerns about sensationalization that happens when single studies are treated as news and in a sense dramatized by a combination of the press release and the journalist,
Right.
so that it makes it seem like science is having a eureka moment, whereas in fact there's a lot of other research and studies that fit into the whole knowledge picture that are not getting the same attention. And in fact, the one that's getting the attention might even be out on its skis too far or only part of the story, even wrong, and requiring retraction.
Right.
Usually that's not it, but it could be. It's one of the risks. Plus, so that those issues are already there. I've been raising another kind of issue, which is about the latest figures are that there's 3.5 million scientific articles published a year now, which is a giant growth in the last 20 years. This is NSF data, National Science Board, Science and Engineering Indicators. I'm writing another piece on this right now, kind of part 2 of this piece. So I've been looking more closely at that. So what on earth is the story? You cannot cover this in a study-by-study basis. Right. It really raises the risk that your choice of what to cover is going to be arbitrary. So there's another issue there, which is do you know enough to know what's news if you're looking to treat studies as news. And I don't think most journalists have enough visibility into what all of the publishing even is.
Well, and this gets to, well, I think I was trading emails with you. I was talking about a big concern I've had with single study journalism is you end up with single study syndrome, meaning you're you're giving the reader a dramatic new result, and if you're not putting that in the context of what's the bigger picture, then you end up with what I first wrote about this in the New York Times in 2008. I called it media whiplash, where here's today's new study. And by the way, coffee is good for your sex life. And oh, by the way, no, actually, it's bad for you. And what it does is it disengages people with science. It reduces trust if the lens that we're using to determine what's worth covering is just what we would call traditionally news value. What's
Yeah.
Because if you're not saying, well, new knowledge in science is implicitly tentative, then you end up with, unfortunately, I think, disengagement and distrust. And I've seen countless examples of that. Right now, it's happening with the AMOC. I say stop running amok about the meridional overturning circulation because some high-profile scientists, Stefan Rahmstorf being at the lead of the pack, have been pushing that this is more imminent and more likely. And then other scientists, John Baker at the Met Office in England, post new studies that don't get attention because they're not dramatic, and so you don't end up with a balanced picture that some newspapers are in the climate context present. So
This
that's
has been a
another.
hard one for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
I mean, I think it's
so many.
it's
Like
worse than
also,
health.
oh yeah, it is
It
because
really happens in health in a way that
yeah,
audiences notice, I think.
absolutely.
But it can happen. Yeah, it can happen anywhere.
Well, back in COVID, this was I used the single study syndrome as a hashtag increasingly, and early in COVID, I had conversations. This was one where there were these competing models. I remember, like every day there was a new model about where it was emerging, how bad it was going to get, and people would latch on to the model that fit their mental model. And I was like, please stop. and here it came up again in the context of just sort of another, not new, but another feature of our media landscape now is people like Michael Schellenberger, who are definitely have a bias, and they, in this case, he took a study related. It was a sea level. Sea level was the issue, and there was something new. And Michael Schellenberger has more than 1 million followers, et cetera. And he was using some new study to poo-poo that sea levels are rising significantly. And so I threw this out there again, just in the hopes of, again, not necessarily journalists, but just the public generally can just pull back from, just take a breath. Just take a breath. And
Yeah, it's going to be hard because what has been learned. So first of all, there are good study stories too, right? That really give you the context.
yeah.
But what has been learned is that this works for readership.
Exactly.
And so what I fear is a world in which those outlets that are really have a business model that's very built around traffic will say, you know what, we can do even more of these even faster, which is concerning to me, and then deploy AI in doing it.
Yeah, flooding the zone essentially.
Right, and I mean, I think you already see some social media content that to me looks like it may be in effect doing this or something like this. What is the responsible, and let's not forget the number of full-time employed science journalists is not what it once was either. We have this media decline as we have this information explosion in science. So what are the people with limited number of people, limited amount of time? What should they be doing instead? I think that's a lot harder.
Yeah.
And I'm actually working on this right now. I think that although it's going to be a challenge, we need to start to turn to some of the new tools to get the breadth of science, to get a sense of what the elephant is. And that is going to probably require science journalists to start using bibliometrics and giant databases like Scopus and Web of Science to really figure out what's being published and try to find trends more that way. It requires a different set of skills. It's like journalists using LexisNexis, but even more complex in many ways. And also different kinds of stories entirely.
But
yeah,
wouldn't AI be a potential tool there also itself?
Yeah, probably in combination with the results from the databases.
Mm-hmm.
I would think. My sense is that those databases, Scopus, Web of Science, there's some others, still have a content that I'm not sure that the LLMs have access to it in the same way. They probably have access to many of the abstracts, but
yeah, it's such an interesting conundrum. My sense is AI. This sounds overly simplistic. It's like guns and cars. It can be used responsibly or irresponsibly, and I think the bias, of course, as you were saying, because the business model is there, the bias will be to use it irresponsibly.
for
Unfortunately,
some, I don't know. I don't think every outlet is going to go in the same way on this. We'll see, but I don't expect it. I think that you see others in media very much saying, no, our human produced content is our brand. It's our distinction.
right?
And we're certainly not going to back away from that. So, I could see it. I don't know what's going to happen, and I would hate to be quoted as making a prediction, but I could see a bifurcation of the approaches.
Yeah.
Well.
Although, again, in the sense that there's a certain audience that wants the verification and authority, and there's a certain audience that doesn't know what it wants, and they'll end up seeing the other flow.
Yes, because the environment the channels are so numerous. All I'm trying to do is just make us think about these issues. And what was gratifying about the piece was that a number of people in journalism and science communications did respond and say we're grappling with this very thing in a variety of ways, which is good to hear.
So where I get the sense that where you're going to be going next is more of this digging in deeply on these particular kinds of issues.
It was just because it seems to be what I write well about now. I tried out a bunch of different kinds of writing on Substack, and actually those are the pieces that people really seem to enjoy. Maybe it's just where I am. Yeah.
Well, one thing that's really important on Substack or anywhere is to build a sense of a niche where you have a particular where your passion and skill set coincide with something that other people are not adequately addressing. So I think that's
I've been finding my way. I don't charge, partly because I'm finding my way, and I don't know what I can promise because I don't know what it will be yet. But I have been finding that this thread has been a good one for me. It's helped lets me use data, which I like to spend a lot of my time just in R, analyzing things different ways these days. It's really been my new chapter.
That's good.
And combining that with things I'm going to teach about as well, and we do definitely need some deep thinking about the state of the field, given what's going on with newspapers, what's going on with AI. It's hopefully I'll be doing more in this vein. Certainly, I'm writing another thing, kind of a part 2 to this right now. So
good. Well, I hope everyone's going to subscribe. I'll put up the
that's kind.
reportearth.substack.com. There's the link.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
And JG Acker just
Mhm.
weighed in saying, "Hi, Chris, longtime reader and short time collaborator." Says hi.
Hi.
So anyway, that's good.
Is that a
Um,
question or is that a hello?
I think it was more of a
Hi.
hello. Hi, there it is. Hi, Chris, from over in X.
Hi.
Longtime reader, short time collaborator.
Good to hear from you.
Yeah.
I'm glad folks are tuning in.
What are your needs right now? Are you
Needs?
hoping to reach out to collaborate with others? As you settle in at the university in
Oh,
Knoxville.
hmm.
Just any other things we can help propagate here.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I am interested in various kinds of collaborations, quasi research, quasi um, journalism, to different ways of better understanding the state of the field and what it's doing and what it might be doing better. I am experimenting with if there's any kind of research I might be able to contribute, although I don't think that I'm necessarily there yet. But I'm always interested in hearing from people who are interested in similar topics. What am I? Yeah, that's an interesting question. I guess I haven't thought about
Well, keep it in mind.
it. Thank
um,
you.
yeah, and here's your piece on the
Well,
horrible.
I am tracking. People like my newspaper jobs charts,
Yeah,
so I have been keeping them updated. This is just data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics.
right.
They do break out newspaper jobs, and so I mean they keep going down, and they're still a little bit lower this year.
Yeah,
And what conclusions we draw from that um, is a whole different thing. But I'm certainly trying to track it and contextualize it, and I'm always looking for new data sets to track that um, I can kind of create discussion around. And those newspaper ones have certainly people have appreciated those, and they get shared a fair bit.
one of the other issues I wrote a piece a few years ago on Substack. It was off my normal beat. It was on the financial models and how we were becoming increasingly surrounded by paywalls, in what
Mhm.
had been the idea of the World Wide Web was not a walled off world. It was a world of access to information, and how we reconcile those things. If you go to almost every local newspaper outlet now, you have an immediate paywall. There isn't even
Yeah.
a one story access, and so if there's something happening there, like that La Crosse Tribune story I was telling you about the Eagles, and what would be better would be a sort of a micropayment, some kind of a monthly fee you pay to sort of access all of this stuff. So the financial questions, I think, are part of what can help sustain or help destroy some of this stuff too. That's a data set.
Right. Or do we need uh, nonprofits models instead?
Yeah, nonprofit
That's a pretty
models and
big discussion that's very much ongoing.
yeah, and even on Substack, people have sort of overload mode in terms of when they're starting to buy in to supports financially more than a few. It starts to become this overwhelming sense of, oh God, how can I justify doing this? My content is all open. I'm open to paying subscribers if they want to, but the whole idea is if you chip in, you're helping to maintain an open system for those who can't afford to chip in. But
Yeah,
that's
I mean, I like subs. I definitely like the the way that the system is built, the platform, how easy it is to interact with people like you. Um, you can use it in many different ways.
yeah,
Uh, I'm still dabbling, but it's cool, and it does feel like blogging felt like 20 years ago in a lot of ways.
yeah.
Finding a new model.
And you can, the thing that died, that I'm sure you felt this too. When I was doing .earth in the early days, 2007 through about 2012, we were doing a lot of cross conversations, linking to other. I would have debates of a certain level with David Roberts, or maybe even with you about things, and then it seemed to all become the links on a lot of blogging platforms ended up just being self-referential. The crossover, the conversation went away, and I
It's
think
true.
there's more of that. I'm feeling a little more of that here. Although
It
still,
is.
I mean,
Yeah.
Substack. The thing that bugs me about Substack is it's cast as newsletters, and newsletters are they're unidirectional and me to you. They're not. I mean, people do chats and stuff, but it doesn't feel like it has that same dynamic yet. At least maybe not yet.
The early blogosphere was very. I mean, we were at the American Prospect. That was a liberal publication, but the early bloggers many were on the right or libertarian right. What was interesting about it was there was all this back and forth. We're always talking to each other.
Right.
Yeah, I think that was a great thing. It was, yeah, it's not the case as much.
No, and even
There's
now
not
we
a
have
good thing.
Blue Sky talking to itself, and X talking to itself.
Right.
Yeah, it's frustrating.
Um, yeah, and I think, well, this is also why I still think the journalist is really important, because whatever you think of the journalist, they are going out and they are talking to people of different views. It is the job.
Right.
Um, and thank goodness someone is doing it, because a lot of people aren't doing it. So,
And finding ways to sustain that capacity is really important. So I'm really glad you're going to settle in at University of Tennessee, Knoxville, and which is a
looking
school
forward to it.
I got to know a little bit earlier this year, and hope to learn more about what you're up to. So good luck settling in there. We
Thank
have a
you.
decent audience here if you want to go a little longer, but it just looks
I'm
like,
happy to. Yeah, I don't know the parameters exactly. I guess you have no time.
well, it's this. I'm in a flexible universe.
Okay. Well, I
I'm,
could go till um,
I'm my own
maybe
boss.
I could go a little past two. Sure. Sorry,
Let's.
a little past three.
We haven't talked. We should talk about the Washington Post.
Okay. Yes.
You were there at a moment when it was still. It's still there's still reporters there doing great work,
I've
but
just
boy
seen
oh
some.
boy,
Yes, they are. Yeah.
boy oh boy, in a tough situation. Right? Just describe a little bit about the dynamics that led to this series, and just generally that was sort of boom time for climate reporting. I think
Mhm.
that decade,
Yeah, I
which
was
ended with this piece, is kind of with this series.
um, I was fortunate to live through at one of the top papers this period of um, real experimentation and I think innovation in climate journalism. Yeah. Um, and our what we did that allowed us to innovate was really a lot of focus on data journalism and in teams and large groups, in big projects like the one you have on the screen. I learned so much from it that it basically changed everything I do, and now I'm looking for the data almost immediately when I'm thinking about any potential story. My ability to work with it is it's kind of. I think I'm a lifelong learner, and by nature anyway. But this has been my big new chapter, and it's been quite a fun time. And then to learn how to teach about it, which I'm still
Yeah.
learning. But yeah, this project. I think the climate group at the Post, which was, I'm going to say, maybe five-ish people around the time a little before this. I mean, it's hard to really put a firm number on it, but because people do different things and you collaborate constantly, right? So
Right.
you're often working with people who aren't doing it all the time. But we had a new editor come in, and we were organized under the national desk, whereas before we'd been sort of organized under different ones. And the new editor was Trish Wilson, who I really loved working with. And the new editor wanted to do something ambitious and wanted to do a project, and asked me and others to sort of come up with something that we could build the whole project around. And I was seeing in various studies that I was reading just a lot of references. I'd started to see a pattern in terms of references to places that were above the average or and having some kind of consequence as a result. Because the global average temperature is an average, right? But
Right.
there are many places that are colder than it or have less of a warming trend. Some even may have a cooling trend, and some that are way above it. And this idea sort of got rolling of, can we look at the places that are different and what's happening in the places that are above average, because everything's warming, and they're the places that are going to get first to the various thresholds locally that the globe will eventually get to later. So we ended up talking to all the climate scientists to figure out which data sets could be used to do this, and it turns out that it's the global average temperature data sets. But the scientists themselves had displayed all this variability for themselves many times, but treating it as the news in and of itself, as the story, was a bit different. Mostly there are papers on certain regional things happening, but mostly we would get, the big story would be the globe is now at this year at 1.44 or whatever it is.
Right.
So we got a handle on how to really represent and visualize this. And there's a really talented data journalist and graphics journalist, John Meiskens at the Post, who was basically doing all this. I didn't know how to do this at the time.
Right.
I was learning, but did all this. And then we sent reporters all around the world to these regions. We went to anywhere from Australia to Africa and we were pretty much on all the continents in some way or another. I did the South America story, but we wrote really detailed, sometimes fully narrative driven, but often at least narrative driven stories. But we had data that were contextualizing the stories, and the data were the reason that we were telling the stories in the first place. In some cases, we found stories that had not been told, had not gotten attention, because we were looking for them. And this is what my piece is about data. The first piece about data and story that you had up for a minute was about how data sets lead to new stories.
Right.
So the one that I did in Uruguay, for instance, and was about warming spot offshore that looks a lot like some of the patterns created by the Gulf Stream, but this is in the South Atlantic. It's a different thing with a different ocean current. But how the impact this was having on a coastal community where a population of clams that people had collected to sell and to sometimes eat had basically had all these huge die-offs because of the ocean temperatures. And yeah, that story, which I really was proud of, as far as I can tell, it really had not gotten any attention. We found it because of the data said there's this really warm area in the South Atlantic Ocean off the coast of Uruguay, Brazil, and Argentina. So we went. That was kind of how the project went. And yeah, it came. There were a lot of stories, a lot of people contributing to it, dozens, I would say, and it did win the Pulitzer. So
pretty cool.
Yeah.
And now I think the work that you're doing hopefully will help create a generation that's more capable than I am at using data directly rather than maybe waiting for scientists to point you to it.
I think it's an increasingly important skill for today's journalists.
Yeah.
For sure. And you can't just get it from, telling Claude Code to do something, right? There's a whole nother layer of, even though those tools are becoming incredibly powerful, there's a whole other layer of journalistic judgment and data communication that you must be applying,
right,
here as everywhere else. So
you seem to be a big fan of Data Wrapper.
Well, Data Wrapper is a wonderful tool. What you're actually showing, though, is an R graphic. Because sometimes I do hit walls with Data Wrapper. I have managed to. I use it a lot, and it is a great tool used by journalists and media organizations all over the place because it's so user friendly, and it creates it creates beautiful graphics.
Yeah.
And it creates them fast. But there are some limits in the customization where there's some things that you can't necessarily get it to do. And as far as I know, this is one of them, right? Where you could make the stacked chart of this is the 5 biggest papers and how many
Right.
climate articles. Yeah, I could do that in Data Wrapper, but as soon as I want to put the moving average on top of it, I'm not sure I can do that.
Oh, I see.
Right, so because that's 2 different what we would call geomes or geometries. And Data Wrapper really wants you to pick one. It also doesn't. I don't think it really has a moving average, unless you were to. You could input the moving average as data yourself, but it won't. It's not going to. It's not going to calculate it. I don't think so. So it's really great. It's super. I teach it to all my students, but then I also in the data journalism class I say now go make it in R and see how close you can get to the same thing. And there, the difference is you can customize anything. I can't think of any limit that I'm aware of on what you can customize. But Data Wrapper is a great start.
Great. Yeah. Well, I really appreciate your time, and maybe we can come back. You can come back sometime, or maybe once you're situated at Knoxville.
Yeah, I'm glad we did this. I really appreciate you bringing me on, and it's a great thing you have going with the audience you've established here, and I like this next act of yours as well. So,
Francesca Lyman says thank you.
Oh,
she just sent in a comment from LinkedIn. One thing I really like about what I've been doing is I use StreamYard, and it goes simultaneously to LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, and X, and Substack. So you can bridge audiences.
I don't even know where I'm appearing right now, but it seems to be lots of places.
It could be lots of places. So thanks again, Chris Mooney, moving to the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, from University of Virginia, a already long career at a young age, an impactful career in journalism and media analysis. And good luck with your next steps. And everyone should tune into your work at reportearth.substack.com.
Thanks, Andy. Appreciate it.
So this is a wrap for Sustain What. I think I'm doing another show tomorrow. I got to set it up with some of the scientists who are running they're just launching this afternoon around 4:00 a 50-hour marathon of science communication on weather and climate stuff, and stay tuned for that too. Take care wherever you are. Get in touch with me via that scrolling bar at the bottom, and be well.